Imagine your Oracle database is down, and at the same time you have lost the control file. Your backup may still exist, but recovery just became much more complicated. That's exactly why RMAN Control File Autobackup is so important. In this video, we will look at what the control file contains, why it is critical, how RMAN automatically protects it, where those backups are stored, and how we can restore the control file during recovery. First, let's understand what we are protecting. The control file is a small but extremely important Oracle database file. It contains critical database metadata, including the database name and database ID, information about the data file location, redo logs, checkpoint information, and RMAN backup metadata. So although the control file is much smaller than our actual data files, it contains information that Oracle needs to understand the database structure and recovery environment. That's why losing it can create a serious recovery problem. So why is this file so important? Oracle uses the file to track the database structure and checkpoint information. RMAN also relies on the information stored in the control file to understand the backup available to the database. Now imagine the control file is lost. We haven't necessarily lost our actual backup, but we have lost important recovery metadata that helps us work with those backups. And that's where control file auto backup becomes extremely valuable. It gives us another copy of this critical information. Control file auto backup is an RMAN feature designed to automatically protect two important files, the control file and SP file. The idea is simple. Instead of depending only on the active control file, RMAN automatically creates a backup copy. So if the original control file is lost during a failure, we have another copy available for recovery. This reduces the amount of manual work required during disaster recovery and gives us an important recovery foundation. The big advantage here is automation. As DBAs, we don't want to depend on remembering every individual control file change. RMAN can create control file auto backups after backup operation and after certain structural changes. For example, changes involving the database structure can result in an auto backup being created. The important point is that this happens automatically once the feature is enabled. That gives us an additional layer of protection without having to manually back up the control file every time. Now let's compare the two situations. Without control file auto backup, recovery can require more manual steps. Important backup metadata may not be immediately available, and we may need to identify the database ID and reconstruct more of the recovery environment. With an auto backup available, we have a backup copy of the control file that can be restored. That gives RMAN a much better starting point for continuing the recovery process. So this is a small configuration, but it can make a very big difference when we are dealing with a database failure. Fortunately, enabling the feature is very simple. From the RMAN prompt, we run configure control file auto backup on. That is it. We can then verify the configuration using show control file auto backup. This should be one of the configurations we check when setting up or reviewing an RMAN backup environment. Once enabled, RMAN can automatically create the control file and SP file backups as required. Now let's look at how RMAN identifies this auto backups file. You will commonly see a file containing information such as database ID, date, and sequence. For example, the first digits represent the database ID, the second group of digits represents the date, while the last digits represent the sequence. The date tells us when the backup was created, and the sequence helps distinguish the backup. This naming format becomes particularly useful during disaster recovery because RMAN needs to identify the correct auto backup for the database we are recovering. Next, where does RMAN actually store these auto backups? They can be stored as part of the fast recovery area when it is configured for the database. We can also define a specific backup destination using RMAN configuration. The important DBA consideration is storage protection. Ideally, important backup should not depend entirely on the same storage that contains the database, because if both the database and the only backup copy are lost together, that backup isn't providing much protection. And of course, we also need to monitor available storage space. We can explicitly configure the location where RMAN stores control file auto backups. For example, we can define a backup directory such as U01 backup and use the %F substitution variable in the file name. The %F helps RMAN generate a unique file name based on the database identifier, date, and sequence. This gives us more control over where our auto backups are stored. In a real environment, that destination should have enough capacity and should be properly protected. Now let's imagine we actually need this backup. The database is down and the control file is missing. Because the control file isn't available yet, we can start the instance in no mount mode. If necessary, we can identify the database using the database ID. Then we can restore the control file from the auto backup using restore control file from auto backup. Once the control file has been restored, we can mount the database and continue with the recovery process. This is where the auto backup really provides its value. Now let's look at the complete recovery picture. We have a database failure and the control file is lost. We locate the control file auto backup and restore it. Once the control file is restored, we can continue restoring the required data files. Then we can apply the necessary redo and recover the database. So the auto backup provides an important starting point for the recovery process. Instead of trying to rebuild everything manually, we have a protected copy of the control file available to help us move forward. As DBAs, enabling auto backup is only the beginning. We also need to store backup safely, separately from the database storage. We should monitor the fast recovery area so that storage doesn't unexpectedly become full. We also need to protect our backup storage and, most importantly, test the control file restoration process and know your database ID. Because during a real disaster, you don't want to be searching for basic recovery information while the database is already down. Let's quickly recap. The control file contains critical database and recovery metadata. RMAN Control File Autobackup automatically protects the control file and SP file. We can enable it with a simple RMAN command configured where the backups are stored and restore the control file where recovery requires it. But don't stop at enabling the feature. Store your backup safely and test the restoration process, because the real value of backup isn't that it exists. The real value is knowing that you can actually use it when your database needs recovery. If you found this useful, like the video, subscribe for more Oracle DBA content, and drop your next RMAN topic in the comments.